It is great to have you with us today at the Entrepreneurial Clinician podcast. I am your host, Jo Muirhead, and today we have the incredible Angela Lockwood back with us. But before we get into this incredible discussion today, I just want to acknowledge the Darug people of the land that I am coming to you from today. Thank you to their leaders, past, present, and emerging, and thank you for taking such incredible care of the land that I get to call home. So, Angela, you are not new to this podcast. You've been here before. You actually helped me with my book back in 2017, 2018. But today's topic has actually come from my community. And as soon as somebody said to me, can you get someone to come in and speak about neuroplasticity and the role it plays in burnout? I went, I know exactly who I want. And that person was you. So welcome back. Thank you. And let's get into this discussion. But before I start talking about all the things I want to talk about, can you just refresh our listeners' memory as to who you are, what you do, how you turn up in the world? Just give us a bit of a bio.
Jo, thanks so much. And it is great to be back on here. And you know that I'm a big fan of yours. I love watching the work you put out. I love listening to the work you put out, the great guests you have on. So I'm very honored to be a part of that crew again. And it was interesting just off air. We were chatting a little bit about the book that I wrote back in 2007 called Switch Off, How to Find Calm. Thank you very much for the plug. It's interesting. I've been talking about how we find calm in our thinking for so long. 2017 was when I wrote Switch Off initially, and I feel like I could republish that book now. And because whether or not enough people read it, or that we just haven't learnt the lesson. I'm not sure which one it is yet, or it's a combination of both. But for those people that haven't been in my world before, I am an occupational therapist by background. And I've been working for 20 years with busy brains, really is the way to say it, both kids and adults. So I've been very fortunate to be working in schools alongside educators on helping them really be inclusive around all different learning styles, be inclusive around how kids think, how their brains develop, and how we can help them, be the best versions of themselves. And while I was doing that, also speaking about exactly the same things, but in the adult world. And people always go, "Hang on a minute, don't you work with kids?" Or kids when I'm working in schools, I go, "Don't you work with corporates?" And I'm like, "Yes, I work with both." But the core messaging is really, how do we find calm in a very busy world? And I think even over the last, even though I've been speaking about it for 20 years, I'm seeing books be published now and topics be discussed that I sort of go, hang on, we've been talking about this for a very long time. This is not new, or this is not cutting edge, but I'm very excited that there's a bigger platform now that we can share these messages, and people are more open to receiving that, hey, to do more in life, you don't actually have to speed it up. You don't have to do more. You don't have to cram on. And I know we'll cover a lot of that in our conversation today, but I'm very fortunate to work with a whole range of people and helping them find calm in their lives. And I'm learning as I go too, Jo, with a busy brain. With a busy
Busy
brain, it's a
brain.
learning curve for me
It
too.
certainly is. And I think that people will often say to me, don't you work with people with severe disabilities? Don't you work with corporates? Don't you, that I have the same, that I work with people. Like
Yeah.
it's people everywhere who have these issues. It's people everywhere who have these problems. It's just my messaging around that, and the way I get to deliver that might look different. So I think you get to take your message into corporate, you get to take your message into schools, and I think that's wonderful. I don't work with kids because, no thanks. But you get to affect people positively across a lifespan. And like, to me, that's just exciting. It's like the generational change that we can now start to hope for, as opposed to feel disenchanted by.
Yeah. Look,
But rather than
even
go on.
yesterday, Jo, I had a conversation with a childcare educator. It was really interesting. And she said to me, and it was really powerful, I thought about it so much after I left. And she said, I find it really difficult to help children regulate their emotions when I can't even do it myself.
Yes.
And for me, I go, that's the power in that sort of lifespan education of knowing that
Yes.
if we're going to be great role models for kids, then we need to also have the skills on board as well.
Yeah.
That's where I find I'm very thankful and very grateful for the work I get to do, and be able to speak to communities like yours who have the ability to affect so many people. And if just
Yes.
one thing that we talk about today can help someone do things differently, then I am so happy.
Absolutely. And the thing that excites me is people will reach out to me and let me know that they've listened to a podcast and they've applied it to their own life, but they're now working with their clients around a similar concept as well. And I guess that's my hope, is that we get to change some of the negativity and address some of the risks for us in our own work, but because of that, we actually become better clinicians. And I think, yes, we could talk about our philosophies around that forever, but that's not why you're here. So I am now really nervous because before we hit record, I could not say the word neuroplasticity. So I feel like I'm going to stumble over it every time I try now. But that is the topic of today's conversation. And I want to say a really big thank you to Yale, who put it in the Future Proofing Health Professionals Facebook group, saying, could you please find somebody to talk about this? So we're going to cover a few things today to keep you enthralled and excited. I'm going to get Angela to give us a bit of a definition, a working definition. We're going to cover off what it's actually not, because we've probably got a lot of people on TikTok. I wouldn't know, I'm not there, but TikTok telling us what it is when it really isn't. And then I've asked Angela to talk specifically into the neuroplasticity contributions to burnout and burnout recovery. So that is the pretty meaty subject topics that we're going to take on today. Okay, so can we just start with, what is it? What is neuroplasticity? Let's start there.
Well, the fact that even you've had a listener or somebody in your community even request this topic shows how far that we've come in understanding, like, to be able to talk about neuroplasticity and how the brain actually works. It's showing that people now are realizing that we do have some control over how our brains function, and that we want to know, how can we use this amazing thing that we have, that we carry around with us everywhere? How can we really unlock its potential? So that makes me excited. So thank you so much for, I guess, posting this question, because neuroplasticity is something that, even though it's been a concept that we know now, it hasn't really been around for that long. It's sort of like I don't know, mid 1940s, I guess, that it really came to light. But neuroplasticity really is the brain's ability to reorganize itself and sort of form neural connections. So that's probably the most simplistic. Now, neurologists that are listening to this are probably going, is she serious? She's just simplified that way too much. But for the benefit of listeners, I think if we can realize that our brain has neurons in it that that basically talk to each other in everything that we do through its synapses, our brain's ability to adapt to things that either are great for us or not so great for us is really quite remarkable. And in the late sort of 20th century, there was the concept of neuroplasticity. Now, I always get this guy's name wrong, so I'm sorry if I pronounce it incorrectly. But Paul Baccarita is his name, I think, is how I say it. But Pedro Baccarita, he was a Spanish poet and professor, and he had a stroke. And what happened was it left his left arm paralyzed, of course. So on one side of his body, he was paralyzed and unable to speak. And so what he did is he went out and sought medical opinion from so many different doctors. And pretty much they said, look, you're not going to recover. You're going to remain disabled for the rest of your life. You're going to have impaired function. So unlucky, mate. You know, this is your lot in life. And his son, who was a doctor, thought, no, this is not right. This is not, this doesn't feel right. I know that there's more to just saying unlucky, that's your lot. So what they did is they looked at rehab quite differently. And what I love about this, Joe, is for us, it's like, of course they did, you would do this. But back then, this was cutting edge. So what they went through as the rehab program was very much based on exercise, just daily exercise, physical exercise that stimulated movement and coordination, all of those things that we know in a rehab program is a part of it now. But also as a part of that program, they looked at repetitive tasks and things that were very task orientated. Now, obviously, as an occupational therapist, this super excites me because I'm like, yes, task orientated, integrate this into life functional activities. But what he did is he did these daily exercises. And what they found with the daily exercises, of course, things started to improve. He started to see functional improvements in his movement. But
Mm.
it wasn't just about the physical exercises. It was also about the cognitive exercises that they were doing alongside it. So what he was doing as a part of the rehab program was doing things like reading and writing and solving puzzles and really integrating the physical aspect with the cognitive aspect. And what they found through the recovery is that he improved more. Of course, the doctor said he wouldn't improve at all, but he
Mm.
improved quicker. He regained
Yes.
his ability to walk and to speak and perform daily activities independently. So they knew they were onto something. And so, what I guess this exposure and this experience obviously led to more studies being
Hmm.
conducted because, as you know, people go, well, that worked. How come that worked? Well, we better find out why. And then his son went on and did a whole lot of scientific validation around it. And what they found was this concept of neuroplasticity, that no matter what happens, the brain has an ability to shift and reconnect and learn new things. And I think it's a really exciting process to go through, because when you look back at its origins, it was almost found through somebody being questioning the medical system.
Yes.
That's what I
Yes.
loved. It was someone going, hang on, this can't be everything. This can't be
Mm.
enough. We want more than what we're being given. And how often do we
Mm.
hear that, Joe, where
Mm.
people are told something, they
Mm.
question it, and then their recovery is so much greater than if they just
Yes.
sort of sat on their laurels and went, oh, well, this won't change. So what happened with neuroplasticity is very much the world went into looking more around people who had also sustained brain injuries.
Hmm.
And what they found is through a lot of, and we're going to cover this a little bit more, what are some of the things we can do to
Mm.
help our brain make these neural connections? It doesn't have to be just after a major incident like a stroke. It could just be, and as we'll explore in response to burnout, in response to
Mm.
daily stresses. But pretty much in summary, neuroplasticity is really about the brain's ability to be able to reorganize itself and form new neural connections so you can do more.
Yep. Great. I love it. And I do appreciate the simplicity. And I'm thinking that the
Good.
neurologists who are listening to it are going, oh, thank God, I've now got a simple statement I can say to the next patient who walks through the room. So thank you. Because, I had an appointment with a neurologist this week, and I think she's a lovely person, and I appreciate her help. But Jesus, wow, those words were big. And and I wasn't having a good brain day. So my brain was sitting there going, well, her mouth is moving. Don't really know what's coming out of it, but okay.
And even the word neuroplasticity, right? Like neuro, we
Yeah.
know is brain, and then plasticity is really about being malleable, being able to change. So
Yes.
if you look at just the word in itself, just think about your brain has the ability to adapt and to change.
Yep.
And we could go into, and I'm definitely not a neurologist or a neurosurgeon, so there's people who are way smarter than me that can unravel this in a lot more detail. But for the benefit of listeners who are going, well,
Mm.
how can I use my
Mm.
brain to the best of its ability? How can I work with it
Mm.
so that I can unlock more potential in me? Well, let's
Nice.
make it as simple as possible.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely wonderful. So I'm assuming that there are now some people around who have misconstrued or created some definitions or experiences of neuroplasticity that aren't helpful. Have you got a couple of things that neuroplasticity is not?
Well, what I am interested in is I'm not on TikTok. So
Neither am
I would
I.
love to know, what are these TikTok things you referred to?
Okay, I've just
I know what
assumed.
TikTok is, but not.
Uh-oh. Maybe I've got it all wrong, and yeah, okay. So some of the things that I have heard, particularly in my own world, is that neuroplasticity only works after a really, really, like it's only relevant after a really, really traumatic event. And you've already debunked that myth, right? That is actually, I've even had some people tell me it's not real. So I think that's kind of a bit ridiculous. Or that it's only the domain of people like you and I. That a psychologist or a psychotherapist or an exercise physiologist or an ophthalmologist, like that, they don't have any real responsibility or authority to be working with neuroplasticity. So I think that's a bit of a myth too, right? Because
They are
we're all
all,
working with the brain.
yeah, they're all myths. And I really see that if with any type of learning,
Yeah.
if you are interested in a topic, you go to the sources that have credibility. And
Mm.
let's face it, TikTok's not one of them.
Thank
Unless
you.
there's a neurosurgeon on there that is using
Yeah.
TikTok as a platform, right?
Yeah.
But you go to sources of credibility to find out the information that you need. And really, I find so much what we do nowadays, Joe, with when it comes to our health and with understanding ourselves, we really overcomplicate things. We really try to um, look for ways to sometimes even counterbalance what we know
Yes.
intuitively is right.
Yes.
It's quite a fascinating human trait that we have. But if we know that our brain has the ability to adapt, there are so many real life examples of this. Look, I'm one of them myself. You know, as you know, my story is that when I was 17, I sustained a brain injury myself. I was hit in the temple on the left side with a hockey ball. And what I know throughout that experience was my brain really was never the same.
Mm.
And I'm so thankful for that because I
Wow.
know that, there was a certain way that my brain functioned prior to that.
Mm.
I was told I would never speak again. The doctors, my neurosurgeon, who was somebody who was very, obviously knowledgeable, he operated on my head extremely successfully, had a conversation with my parents that Angela would not be able to string a sentence together because of where it hit me in the brain.
Mm.
Now, if I had taken that on board and my parents had taken that on board and went, oh, well, she's never going to speak again. She's always going to have brain connectivity issues. I wouldn't be doing the work that I do today.
Exactly.
So what I did, which is what we'll explore a little bit more, is had a team of professionals around me to help. But also what I did is I educated myself. Now I was only 17 at the time and clearly didn't want to be a 17-year-old who couldn't speak or had difficulty with coordinating movements or had difficulty with long-term memory. No, I had things I wanted to do in life, Joe. Like I
Yes.
wanted to go to uni, I wanted to do all these things. So what I had to do is, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back at it, it was neuroplasticity in action. And it was neuroplasticity in action because of the repetitive activities that I did, because of the professionals that I saw it, because of the physical activity, the types of work that I was doing, the cognitive demands I was placing on my brain. But also it wasn't at the time, now that I look back at it, it was also the rest that I was giving my brain that was as equally as important. So it wasn't always pushing and learning and doing and doing and doing. It was also about giving my brain the ability and the space to heal itself. And that's where neuroplasticity really is important to part of the silly analogy, but get your head around.
Yeah. I was waiting for it.
Like, come on, we've got to say that, right?
We really do.
But yeah, so I look back on my own experience professionally, but also personally. And I think if I knew what neuroplasticity was back then, that was that in action. But now that I know what I know, we all have the ability to tap into the power of our brain. We just need to educate ourselves on how we could do that.
Yeah, that's great. And I can imagine there are people listening to this now who are starting to, join the dots and going, oh, that's why this happens and that's why this happens. But, stay with us, people, because we really want to unpack it and make sure that you don't miss any of the dots you're already starting to connect here as well. So there's something very powerful in understanding that our brain is not a fixed organ. Right? It can actually change and actually move. And I was actually reflecting, I can't actually see it on my bookshelf, but my very first neuropsych textbook told me that the brain was fixed. And once it was damaged, it couldn't, that was it. All right. And that's now a history book because it's been debunked. Right. But understanding that all the things we do very repetitively, right, is what is helping our brain go, oh, we do this thing a lot. We do this thing very much. So I'm going to take it from the really painful, hardworking front part of my brain, and now I'm going to put it into the filing cabinet part of my brain because it's easy. Because I know what to do here. I know what to expect here. I'm going to put my other resources to use in making sure that we've got, the protections going on, or because we're going to need those, or, breathing, or, walking up a hill, or whatever's going on. So that's my little interlude there. So Angela, my next question is, how does neuroplasticity then contribute to health professionals experiencing burnout?
Really great question. If I can just really quickly jump back.
Yep.
Something that you said, and I think that's really important. People go, we're definitely not talking about that the brain can't be damaged. Of course it can be damaged. What happens is our brain is so amazing that it almost calls in the troops to go, hey, we've got a bit of damage here. How can we restructure and how can we rework ourselves so that we support that area of our brain? And we know, like for little kids, there's developmental neuroplasticity. You know, they're learning to walk, they're learning to crawl, they're learning all these new things. We also know that there's adaptive, so neuroplasticity, which is like for us in older people, not children, is our brains are always learning new things. Gosh, like I look at AI at the moment, I feel like my brain.
Oh, you and
my
me
brain,
both.
I don't know if it's neuroplasticity or explosion, but either way, I'm learning a whole lot of new stuff. But there's also, functional neuroplasticity, which is where your body learns to move in different ways. And of course, your brain has a effect on that. So there's a whole range. There's also, I guess, structural neuroplasticity as well, where your actual brain structure starts to change. But I think it's really important that we highlight that the brain can be damaged.
Yes, absolutely.
The brain does
Thank
get
you.
damaged, but our brain has this, and the neurons in our brain have this amazing way of rallying together and go, we need support in this area. We need to tap into this area and really help that be as functional as possible. And that's what we're talking about and that's the stuff that we're going to talk about now. So going to your question, sorry, I digress.
Oh, no, I think that's a really important, because if anyone was sitting here going, oh, there's no such thing as a brain injury, according to Joe and Angela, it's like, no, that's not what we're saying. Different podcast.
Well, there's definitely brain, I still have, residual brain trauma, I guess. I still get headaches in that part of my brain. So I know that there's definitely damage there for sure. But I also know the rest of my brain really kicked in and helped out a lot.
Absolutely.
So let's have a look when you question around burnout. Okay.
Yeah.
So burnout in health professionals, let's say it's for health professionals, but if you're listening and you're not a health professional, of course, it applies to you as well. What happens with burnout, of course, it's sort of that you're going to have a much more beautiful definition of this. But burnout is really that effect of feeling like we don't have enough energy. We might be feeling cognitive fog. It might be that we're physically feeling drained, that our brain, we can't make great decisions. There's a whole range of symptoms that occur because of burnout. And everyone has their own definition of burnout too. So I don't want to give an explicit definition, but what happens with our brain when it comes to this sort of chronic exposure to stress? Our brain actually undergoes structural changes and functional changes to adapt to that. So if I can go through just a really quick scenario.
Go for it.
All right, I'm going to call this lady Sarah. Let's just say Sarah. So Sarah is really busy at work. She's got a big team of people working with her. She's getting lots of work coming her way. Well, initially what Sarah can do is make changes to her life by, working longer hours. She can multitask to meet deadlines. So her brain can adapt. She can adapt her lifestyle to sort of counterbalance some of that stress. And her brain allows her to sort of jump from one thing to the next for a little while, okay? Because our brains are phenomenal. But what happens after a while, if that becomes Sarah's norm, if she continues to face these, competing deadlines, people wanting too much of her time, her not giving herself time to sort of press pause and rest, what happens is the brain actually starts to make sort of maladaptive connections. So the brain starts to go, hey, this connection isn't working for me, but this seems to be the norm. So let's create that connection, and that becomes the new norm. Yep. Okay, so it's not this beautiful, flow of communication. It now becomes something that it's like a glitch in the system, but that glitch becomes the new norm. Okay, that glitch becomes the brain goes, oh, okay, well, this is how we do things. And what it does, it affects different parts of your brain, like the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus. It affects all of those different parts of the brain. Now, when this becomes to the point where your brain goes, oh, this is like my new normal, this doesn't feel comfortable, then that's when burnout sort of jumps in. Okay, that's when burnout happens. And what we find is not only just from a physical point of view, but there's negative thought patterns that start to jump in with that. So remember right back when I was talking to you about, the sort of the beginning of neuroplasticity, where the gentleman who had the stroke was doing physical activity, but he also started to do the cognitive activity with it as well. What we find, because of the neuroplastic changes that happen because of burnout, is that these negative thought patterns also become a part of the norm.
Mm,
So not only do we have physical structural changes happening, we also have the thinking behind and the cognition behind the burnout starting to work together.
Oh
So
dear.
basically, I know it's like a
Oh dear.
God,
And then, and because I know the children's song, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, I'm going, oh yes. So then we have emotions, and then we have hormones, and then we have, parts of our joints that don't want to work properly anymore. And I'm like, oh my God, really? Is it this? Oh, it's to me, it's like, wow, we've just really made that simple, but also like, oh my gosh, this is actually bigger than I thought. Like sort of, aha moment.
I often think about I have a gas cooktop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so our stove is a gas cooktop, and when I turn it on, to straight away from off to full on, it's like all the gas just goes and comes out at once, and it sort of almost takes you back a little bit, and it makes it sort of scares you sometimes. And if the connection's just that little bit out of whack, so I don't know what it's called, but there's like a little thing that connects to the rest of your stove. Sorry if anyone's listening to this and knows what I'm talking about, but that little connection piece, if that's out just a little bit to the left or right, or just what happens is it starts to like splutter. It has this little gas leakage almost, and you can start to smell the gas leakage, and that really freaks you out.
Yeah.
So I sort of liken it to that when, even though you've got all the power there, sometimes it can be really lovely and the flow can be coming through the gas system. If something's just that little bit, the connection's not right, then it does become something that can be dangerous. It becomes something that you need to action immediately. Otherwise, you get gas leakage. Literally, you get, the system doesn't really work. You don't get to cook what you need to. So what we have to do is turn that off, give it a bit of breathing space. Don't turn it back on again. Otherwise, there's going to be a fire or an explosion. But you need to give it a little bit of time just to let that gas go back into the way that it needs to, fix the problem, turn it back on, and then you're good to go. And it's like with burnout with our brains, that if the connections aren't working smoothly, if things aren't talking to each other in a way that they need to be talking to each other, then the flow-on effect is huge. We get, not only physical sickness, but we also get mental fatigue. We get relationship breakdown as well, because we don't have that ability to pick up people's, cues of when they're unhappy, when they're sad. And we also start to get really disillusioned that this is the way life always needs to be, but it doesn't have to be. So hopefully that makes sense. For people without gas cooktops, you're probably thinking, I have no idea what she's talking about.
But that's okay. We'll come up with another story in the next little while. That's okay. So I want to give an example. I'm going to use myself as an example now, because I've been very, very clear that I used to be the queen of burnout. And I say used to, not because I've gotten rid of it, but because I'm much more aware that it's something I now need to, it's like a risk of me. Like I learned how to be really good at burnout. So my brain got used to overworking, overcompensating, doing more than what was reasonable in a day. My attitudes got used to people pleasing and wanting to be the best I could be, and helping all the people that only I could help because I'm so good at what I do, and then my body got used to me ignoring hunger, needing to go to the toilet, understanding that I had a headache, wondering why I felt sick all the time. I just learned to push all of those things down. Now, I did that for 30 years. Now, we know that chronic stress is about what, 3 months?
And you do it for 30 years. Wow.
Look
at you sticking with it.
I know. Once I've got a good pattern, who wants to change it? No. Okay, so let's to like 26 years, because I know I'm just going to throw it in there. Cancer really did a number on my brain, and I had to learn how to do things differently. But if we know that chronic stress kicks in around the 12-week, 3-month mark, and most of the people who are listening to this have been doing the work for a lot longer than that, our neuroplasticity is well established, right, around the features of burnout, which is why I wrote a book in 2017, which was, this is alarming. We don't have enough people staying in the industry because all the health professionals are burning out. Again, people weren't really interested in that story, but post-COVID, particularly here in Australia, and I know in the US, we do not have enough health professionals to meet the need. We just don't. We've got more university programs coming out in this country now for very, very low cost for Australians because we need the graduates, but it's going to take them 4 or 5 years to be ready. So, So coming back to this whole, if you've been doing this work for longer than 12 weeks, then we've probably got some patterns already starting to be established, and we haven't been very good at interrupting each other, right? So during COVID, we all just got in and got busy. It's what we do, particularly mental health professionals, regardless of your discipline. You just got in and got busy. You got in, you saw the people, you saw the need, you could see how this was going to affect community. So you just got in and got busy. And to be honest, Angela, I only think we're starting to wake up now and go, holy crap, I don't want to ever do that again.
Yeah. It's so right, because the thing with we're talking about neuroplasticity, obviously, but it's about doing things differently. And what we know, like with the story that you shared, that so many people do this, they have habits and patterns that don't serve them well for so long. You know, it's not just 12 weeks. Gosh, if I met someone who was only stressed for 12 weeks, I'd be really impressed. You know, what we're seeing is this chronic stress is just becoming such a part of our norm that our brains are going, well, this is my norm, so therefore I have to respond to that. And when their response is so heightened all the time, and that's what I'm seeing a lot with the clients I work with, that we've got people who have been heightened for so long, there is such a fear of pressing pause on it.
Yes.
So people are going, I have been, and these are very intelligent people who often are telling clients how to do this stuff, but aren't doing it very well themselves. They know what to do from a logical point of view, but the fear of stopping, pressing pause, and taking a step back is too uncomfortable, so therefore they continue to do the habits that don't serve them well. And unfortunately what happens is it gets to a point where they have no choice.
Yes.
And so they go, you know, I'm seeing a really big increase in people who are going, you know, I can just feel I'm just about to at that tipping point, you know, whether that be psychologically, emotionally, or physically. If only they had jumped in a little bit earlier, that tipping point wouldn't have been so crucial. It wouldn't have been so dangerous. So when it comes to doing things differently, if you're experiencing burnout, or even better, you're wanting to stop burnout from happening, and you've got this low level stress that you don't want to see creep up, realizing that the fear of the stuff that waits for you if you don't make a change is going to be far scarier than you just taking half a day off to go and have a massage, or not just massage. It's, you know, people think that that's going to solve the world. I went and had one yesterday. My back's still sore, but you know, it was lovely. It was an important press pause moment. But that whole concept of the fear of stopping, that's what I really worry about for people, is that we're so scared of what it's like to feel calm.
Well, I think it's just so unfamiliar. It feels wrong. Oh, well, then that could just be me talking, but no, I've met, and it just feels wrong. Trying to get people to describe a time when they feel calm, and you're just like, well, that's great for you, but that's possibly not calm. Because most people think, go on.
Sorry, and to, like, just on that, with that feeling calm, also feeling joyful. When was the last time you had that massive belly laugh? You know, that really big laugh with someone where you've got tears rolling down your eyes. You know, that when was that last time when you looked at something and it literally took your breath away? It was something so beautiful and something so, you know, so joyful for you and so peaceful for you that you actually just, it literally took your breath away. I see that so often, and I'm really mindful of that, of when that moment happens, to sit in it, to sit in that joy. And I think too often what we do, we have these moments, and we are slightly digressing here, but I need to say this, that we have too many of these moments in life where we are surrounded by opportunities to press pause that aren't scary. They're right there. And if we just stop long enough to go, I got it, I see it, I'm on it, that our brain will adapt to that. Our brain will go, thank you
Mm,
so much. It's exactly what I've been needing.
mm,
It's exactly the moment of connection that I needed just to help things decompress a little bit. So for people that are listening to this, if this is resonating with you, next time you feel that, you look at something and it just sort
mm,
of gives you that, or you just feel this overwhelming sense of joy, sit in it for a bit longer than what you're allowing it
mm.
currently to be. It might
Yeah.
be watching your kids read at nighttime. It
Mm,
might be that moment of watching their little face and their little brain just trying to work out that word in the book.
mm.
That's such joyful moments, because that sort of stuff doesn't last for too long. But yeah, so I just wanted to
That's
say that to listeners.
no, I think it's really important, and giving us tips or hints along the way. Like, I know for me in my recovery work around this, it's becoming aware of the things I wasn't aware of. So I was so focused on getting into the office early, and that just got earlier and earlier and earlier, leaving later and later and later, and not having bookends to my day. So one of the things I now do is I force people behaviorally, because I know it works. You gotta have something to do before you start work, and you gotta have something that you committed to at the end of work. So we're kind of containing your work into this thing, so it doesn't become a 24/7 activity that you've got going on. But then the next thing that I did around that was I stopped having appointments back to back. Because we actually need to go to the bathroom, people. And we actually need to drink more water. And I know you're not drinking water, which is important for your health, because you don't want to have to go to the bathroom because you've got clients back to back, right? You see a client in the waiting room waiting for the next, and then your day, and then you get to the end of the day and you've got all those notes to write because that client at 10 o'clock in the morning took a little bit longer and you've been playing catch up all day. And then you can't be bothered doing your notes at night. And then you got to go home and cook dinner. And oh my God, I didn't get the groceries today. And oh crap, I've just about run out of fuel. This is how health professionals are living their lives. And if you didn't escalate in me just talking about that then well done you, because I started to.
And it's a really good point, Joe, because you could hear your voice
Yeah.
became quicker. You got a little bit louder. You started to move a bit more. And I think
Mm,
what we've got to be aware of too, and I will go into what are some of the things that you can do to help calm your thinking and help sort of
mm,
strengthen the neuroplasticity of your brain, is being aware of some of those signs and symptoms of what is showing up for you. And I know that this is definitely your expertise here
mm,
for the signs and symptoms of burnout, but we too often just ignore them.
mm.
We just too often go, I can hear that happening in my voice, but we just keep going.
Yeah.
We hear that elevation. And when that elevation happens over a long period of time, and when I say elevation, it's not just in our voice, it's in our shoulders. It's in the clenching of our jaw. Everything just seems to go. Do you notice that when we're stressed, nothing ever just goes to the ground? We
No.
don't feel more grounded. Nothing ever goes downwards. When we're
Okay.
feeling stressed, everything goes up. And
Mm,
often, when I'm talking to people trying to get into the feel of what stress feels like, not what we know it to
mm,
be, but what does it actually feel like for you?
mm,
Number one thing is there's two things really that is the most common. And it's a tightness in the chest
mm.
and a tightness in our head.
Yeah. The
Now,
tightness in the head.
it's the tightness in the head and tightness in
Wow.
the chest. So if we're looking for neuroplasticity, right? If we're looking for our brain to adapt and make new
Mm,
connections and to work with us
mm,
and us to work with it, we need to release that tightness.
mm,
Nothing grows in constriction.
mm.
So if
Beautiful.
our brains are like feeling like they're in this vice, and I often I hear it too often actually, that our head feels like it's in a vice, but our brain feels like it's running.
Yes,
So
that's a great description. I'm sitting here going, I know that.
yeah,
I know
yeah, I know
that.
that. I know that,
Yeah.
right? Like our
Yeah.
brain's going so fast, like it's spinning,
Mm,
spinning, but the brain, or like the
mm,
head around it,
mm,
feels so constricted. Now,
mm.
if we really want for growth to happen and burnout and to have these things released from our lives, or at least the impact of it reduced, because we'll always experience stress, then we need to sort of give our brain some space. We need to release that
Nice.
constriction and give our brain some movement. Let it move, let it, have fun, let it be joyful, let it laugh, let it think, let it be quiet, let it be creative. Because that's when the real great connections will happen in our brain. It's not through the pushing and through the demands and through the hard. It's actually through allowing it some space to breathe.
So, and I like hearing that, but for me, it was like I was always trying to control it. No, I haven't got time for this now. You can't be sore now. You can't, no, I can't do this now. I just need to. So I was overworking my brain, overworking and overcompensating, because it's like, oh crap, I feel awful today. I better make sure I turn up and be on my best game. So I would overfunction, which funnily enough, I got to page 91 in the book, and we have counterintuitively, we respond to being overwhelmed and overstimulated by doing more, which I've already previously underlined, because this is one of the books that I have. It's just like it read my brain. And I think, if you've heard that and you're going, you're doing more to try and compensate for the fact that you're fearful that you can't do enough, which is fueling the whole cycle.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we know how we contribute, how our repetitive behaviors, our repetitive thinking are contributing to burnout. So basically, we've created our brain to operate in a way that allows us to perform during burnout. But like you've already said, it won't last forever. Okay. It's maladaptive. So thank you, brains, for keeping us safe for this amount of time. But the world has changed. The world that I live in has changed. The demands on me have changed. The risks to this work as a health professional have intensified. So how do we then tap into our neuroplasticity to help us recover from burnout? Over to you, Ange.
Thank you. Sort of a great question. Sort of touched on it a little bit here. You actually said it earlier, which I think is the most important first step, is awareness. Okay, so we can read as many books as we like. We can listen to as many podcasts as we like, get more information. But if you are completely oblivious to what's happening in your life, if you are completely ignoring the signs and symptoms that are happening in your thinking, within your body, within your relationships, then all the information is not going to make any difference whatsoever. So you need to become aware of what's going on. And awareness is really difficult if you're running from one appointment to the next, if you're just adding. So awareness, I'm going to have to go back to this point again, is about taking a little bit of time out. It's about taking a step back. Now, don't freak out if people are listening going, I don't have time to go on a retreat. I don't have time to do this. You don't need to do that. The most simple way that you can bring awareness to what's going on is by, when you wake up in the morning, having a practice where you can just do a big deep breath. The minute you wake up, big deep breath in, big deep breath out. Now, if you want to overachieve, go for it and do a few more. Go for it. But if you are too busy and you are too stressed to wake up first thing in the morning and get a beautiful big breath of fresh air into your lungs, then we got bigger problems than this podcast can handle. The next part that you do also is having a big glass of water. So having it next to your bed, flushing your system, letting your system know, hey, it's time, we're here, we're on, hydrating that brain of ours and going, hey guys, we're ready to work together. Okay, so that's just two really quick, very quick wins that you can do in the first minute of you waking up in the morning. No time, it's not lengthy, it's not demanding, it's right there and then. But for the longer, I guess the habits that create more lasting change, of course, is taking time out for mindfulness and meditation. Now, without people freak out a lot about these two concepts of meditation and mindfulness. We have talked about this a little bit. One of the ways that I integrate this into my day, and I see it time and time again, it makes the biggest impact for clients. If, yes, you have the ability to sit and do that mindfulness for like 1 or 2 minutes but gradually increase it, great. But things like if you can incorporate it into your day where you do maybe come home at nighttime and look up at the stars, big deep breath in, look up at the stars, just be there for a minute. To me, that is mindfulness.
Yes.
All right. It's that moments of those moments of joy that everything feels like it stops. Everything feels like, those matrix moments. But those mindfulness and meditation practices are so important because it helps our brains quieten. And of course, on top of those little moments where you can grab it sitting in the car, might be you're at the lights, rather than picking up your phone and scrolling on it, which no one should do in their car. Why don't you just sit there and take a few big deep breaths, look out the window, look off into the distance. That is what mindfulness and meditation can be about. Now, if you want to take this a little bit further, obviously doing a daily practice where you are in a space where you're sitting and you're finding quiet and you're thinking, setting a timer if you need to, going through a guided meditation, that really helps our brains build those strong connections, but also make new connections. Okay. So it's not firing all the time. It's in that rest phase. So that's the number one biggest one. The other one is obviously through things like cognitive behavioral therapy, tapping into looking at how can I reframe my thinking?
Yeah.
How can I re-look at the things in my life that I do so that I can retrain the way I look at things? And this does take a little bit of time. And this is where health professionals, people on here, you guys are so important in this phase for people. Okay. You are so important to help people relook at things in a different way. But if you're struggling yourself with this stuff,
Yes.
put your hand up and seek support from a colleague or a friend or somebody who is in the industry who knows what they're talking about. Because otherwise you're just being that Google, right? You're just giving information and not really making any change. So if you can be somebody who is living and breathing this stuff too, my gosh, the ripple effect is huge. And of course, I'm going to go to two more: physical exercise, get moving, people.
Get moving, people. That's just get moving.
Just get moving. However that looks for you, get moving.
Yeah.
And then also the last one, which we all know is really important, is get adequate sleep.
Yeah. And I just find it amazing that everything that we talk about, we think we're so sophisticated and our issues are so modern, but yet we come back to, can you drink enough water, make sure you're breathing, move your body, and sleep well. And I find it hilarious, or a little bit scary maybe, that these are the things we're still recommending because nobody's doing them yet.
No, Joe, I as you know, I have my own podcast, Distracted, and a couple of episodes ago, I interviewed the CEO of Parkinson's Australia. I have a very strong interest in Parkinson's. My mum has Parkinson's, auntie. I've got lots of connections with Parkinson's. And of course, it was from a professional stream that I was speaking to her. But of course, I also had such a personal interest in speaking with her. I found myself almost waiting for the secret of how can I stop Parkinson's from happening in my brain. I've had a brain injury. I know that there's some factors that come into play. There's a bit of genetics in there. You know what she said, Joe? Exercise.
Please tell me sleep. Exercise.
Well, sleep.
Damn it.
I was like, there's those things again that are so simple for us to implement. And that's where it comes into the neuro aspects. But I do want to just say quickly, a big part of a big area, and I know some people who are listening to this would be experts in this field, but the impact of gut health also on our brain. Such an emerging space that I know has been around for a while, a long time, but there's some really great research now around how the gut affects how the brain works. So I don't think either when we're talking about neuroplasticity, we can't discount the effect of the gut. And we can't discount that these two talk to each other, right? They're always in communication. So we can't look at one and ignore the other.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not going to go into gut health in this one, but for people that are listening, start to sit there. I guess the thing is to think about where is in my life that awareness piece where I might feel a little bit out of control at the moment, or I know that stresses have gotten too much for me, or my brain is so sore that I need to give it space. If you can do the awareness, the strategies of what to do after that, we have the tools to know what to do. Right? We really do. We just need someone, like a conversation like this that you overhear, a book that you might read, something you might watch, and you go, okay, I got it. that it's unless we have that awareness piece,
Mm.
we can't do anything. Otherwise, the other stuff's just adding to the overwhelm.
Correct. And we can't, and I've had an email go out today actually that talked about self-care versus self-compassion and how we've taught, thank you, how we've basically as health professionals, we've created all of these to-do lists around our self-care, which I can assure you is perpetuating the problem. It's actually adding to this problem. The moments of pause are great, but if we don't have a lifestyle of self-compassion to go, burnout is a real risk for me. It's like a forest worker going to work with his chainsaw and not putting his hearing protection on, or God forbid, not wearing the appropriate gloves, right? For us, we now know that burnout is going to affect educators and health professionals. So we've actually got to learn to manage that risk. Doesn't mean that we're all going to be a basket case in bed and not be able to do anything. We're actually trying to highlight the fact that our brains have the ability to adapt positively if we get back to basics, if we find the ways and are brave enough to go, I need some help. I put my hand up here and say, I need some help. Because I can assure you, I am a smart woman who's gone to university, who is a health professional. I could not do this on my own.
Yeah.
I needed to have people around me who could give me perspective. And part of that perspective is, Jo, you have turned your cancer recovery into something that is burning you out. Because I always had to do. Because if I wasn't doing, I wasn't going to heal. But Angela, you've given us a great piece of advice here today. You've given us a lot, but one piece of advice, your brain needs a rest. If it's sore, you've overused your muscle.
Yeah, your brain really does need to rest. And I think, well, if people can take this really, when we look at neuroplasticity, your brain will adapt to the stimuli that you give it. Okay. So if you're giving it stress, if you're giving it overwhelm, if you're giving it pressure, if you're giving it tightness, your brain will respond to that. It'll adapt to it because it's a stimuli that it's been given. However, if you flip that and you know that that's not working for you, if you flip that and you give it the stimuli of space, of rest, of creativity, of wonder, of, daydreaming, if you give it that and you give it challenge, like through puzzles and cognitive activities, then your brain will respond to that. So the power that we have is the ability to choose which stimuli we're giving our brain. Are we going to give it the chronic stress stimuli, or are we going to give it the calming stimuli? But also remember, for people, when they often think of calm, they feel like they're not going to do anything. So it's chilling out, it's sitting under a tree. No, it's not that. It's allowing your brain the space and the capacity to do what it needs to do. So we have that ability to choose which stimuli we give it. I know which one I have definitely dedicated my life to understanding better, because the chronic stress is so it's so seductive. It's such a exciting space to be in, but the other side will actually be more conducive to our health.
Yeah, and longevity.
Yeah,
Health and longevity. And, we've just learned that it's a protection against Parkinson's too. So, because everybody's going to say that. I think that is a great place to stop, because we've been talking for a while, and I think we've given everybody some really useful, meaty things to be able to take away and make change. So before we end this podcast today, I just want to ask the listeners, and come into the Future Proofing Health Professionals Facebook group and start and have this conversation, because Angela's in there. What, from one of the things you've heard today, what's the one thing you want to start? Right? Is it drinking more water? Is it having a big deep breath when you first wake up in the morning? Not tightness in your chest, shallow breathing. There are some really simple things that are incredibly sophisticated that we can actually take action on today. So I would love to continue this conversation in the Facebook group by getting people to tell us, what's the one thing you want to commit to? Because when you've got awareness and then you make a public declaration to it, you'll actually hold yourself accountable. Because there's nothing worse than feeling like someone's going to call you on your stuff. Anywho. Hi, and next time, well, we haven't actually had a coffee in a cafe yet.
No,
We've still got to work that out. So has your coffee order changed since we last spoke?
It has. Well, this a part of my trying to get my brain in a better space. There's been no alcohol for me this year and no coffee for me this year. Not that coffee is a bad thing. It's just that it wasn't working for my brain.
Nice.
So I'm like so black Earl Grey tea.
Wow.
But if I
Okay.
do have a coffee,
Yeah.
it's decaf.
Yep.
It's a latte and it's half water and half milk. So I am so embarrassing to go and buy a coffee for.
I will square my shoulders and point at you while I make that order. But I actually get it, because I've been doing, anyway, that's probably a whole podcast topic in itself, the impact of
Talk to
coffee
you
on our
forever, Jo.
brain. Yeah. Two favorite things coming together. How can people, like you've mentioned you've got a podcast, but how can people learn more about you? Where do we go to find out about Ange?
Always, I like to have one point of contact if we can, and
Mm,
it's at angelalockwood.com.au. On there, there are all the episodes of Distracted, which is my podcast. And you'll get a whole lot of information, sort of, I guess, similar to this, but I also get a lot of wonderful experts come on as well.
mm,
But also social media, not great on Facebook, I have to admit, not my forte, but Instagram at Angela Lockwood and also on LinkedIn. So if there's people on there,
mm.
I do post a lot of articles. I think I'm over 100 articles on LinkedIn. So yeah, if you're on there, jump over and say good day and let me know that you've come through this podcast, and I'll let Jo know.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So thank you again. I appreciate your time and your expertise and the energy that you always bring to my world. And this is me signing off from the Entrepreneurial Clinician podcast. Until next time, go be your awesome self.